Order. I assume attendance has been taken. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Seconded.
Seconder. Okay, moved and seconded. Question, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried, I guess. We have an agenda. Oh. We want to go back through that, Kelly?
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any conflict of interest to disclose? Okay, we'll move to the committee reports. We need the so the staff report. Oops. Okay, Carol.
Thank you, Director Corey. So this is not our first time going through this process. We did this last December, so you're all familiar with how our reserve funds work and how important they are both operationally and financially to the commission. So staff has prepared financial projections to the end of December, and we've made recommendations for reserve fund transfers based on those. We've recommended 8 transfers be made for 2024. And the funds that you're not going to see today, there's a reason we haven't included those. They are all expected to just produce very small surpluses. So no reserve fund transfers are recommended. And in the case of economic development, we are expecting a very small surplus, or a small deficit. But there's no reserve fund transfers for which we can draw on. So there's nothing to bring in. So there's not much we can do about that small deficit. So I'm going to review the projections and we'll go through the recommended transfers for each of the various funds. So the first fund that we'll look at is Cooperative and Regional Planning Services. So for the end of 2024, you can see the different columns. I'm going to be reviewing the projection 2024 column, which is the second one over from your right-hand side. So projection 2024, that's where we expect to be at the end of December. So for revenues, we expect to have revenues of $726,000. You can see there's overages in other funding. That matches up to the overages in administration expenses. That relates to the pool work that we are doing. So the revenues exactly match the expenses and there's no net cost to the commission. Expenses for cooperative and regional planning are projected to be $694,000. That includes a recommended transfer to an operating reserve of $35,000. So before we consider a reserve fund transfer, this fund is expected to have a $66,000 surplus. If we go ahead and transfer the $35,000, the surplus will drop to just under $32,000 for 2024. We've never had a reserve fund for cooperative and regional planning before, so this will establish one. So it would have a balance of $35,000 going forward, and it would allow for flexibility in future years budgeted or for unbudgeted projects that the board wishes to undertake in a given year. Any questions on the cooperative and regional planning? All right. I will keep going then. The next fund that we're going to look at is Planning and Development Services. So for Planning and Development Services, we're seeing revenues are about $77,000 higher than what we had budgeted. And the reason for that is we did receive some government funding to pay for some staffing costs. So that's what the overage is in revenues. Our expenses, administration expenses are currently projected to be over budget by about $40,000. What's driving that overages is both rent costs for the new space. We took possession and we're starting to pay rent costs for the new facility in November. So 2 months worth of that, as well as some professional fees that were over budget. We had some savings on salaries and benefit, and our corporate services allocation is under for the year. So because of those expense savings, we were projected to have a surplus of $148,000 for the year. And we're recommending a transfer to an operating reserve fund for planning and development of $135,000. So after that transfer, that would leave $13,000 as a surplus for planning and development in the year. There is currently a balance in our operating reserve. So after the $135,000 is transferred, the balance would be $161,000 in the planning and development operating reserve. We also have a capital reserve for planning and development, currently with a balance of $8,000. Any questions on that one? All right. Moving right along, solid waste is the next fund that we'll look at. The first page is just a summary. So after the recommended transfers that we'll look on the next page, we are projecting that solid waste will have a surplus in the range of about $218,000 for 2024. I do want to caution that I think this number could change significantly. There's a number of things that are outstanding. And if they arrive before the end of the year, the projection will be correct. If they don't actually come in until January, the projection could change. So we've tried to be conservative with that number, and I think it will change, but I don't think it will change in a negative direction. So the next page is the summary of the landfill. So what we see when we look at the landfill is our revenues were actually about $586,000 over what we had budgeted. Regular garbage is pretty close to budget. Last time we reviewed this, we were about 1,500 tons over where we had expected to be at the end of July. That has cooled significantly. So August, September, and November saw a significant decrease in our garbage tonnage. So we are currently over, but not to the extent that we would have thought earlier in the year. So I expect to be pretty close to budget come the end of the year. Right now, we're projecting about $25,000 over. Construction and demolition tonnage is where we've seen a significant increase. We're about 3,700 tons over what we had budgeted for. And in 2023, just to put that in perspective, our total tonnage for construction and demolition was 4,800 tons. So a significant increase there, which is contributing to our favorable variance in the revenues. For other income, we're going to be about $385,000 over what we had budgeted. We received a call last week that we are going to get a refund from WorkSafe of about $140,000. So that's good news. We paid too high a premium, so we're going to get some money back there. As well as our tonnage for special waste, specifically creosote, timbers, and asbestos has been up in 2024. So that's what's contributing to the increase in the other income. We had previously budgeted to take $500,000 out of reserves to fund the work that is being done at the Baylor facility. That's not necessary this year, so we're not going to take a transfer out. We're actually going to put money into the reserve funds. On the expense side of things, we did have some savings in the expenses, specifically with salaries and benefits, with some vacant positions we had during the year. Our equipment, fuel, and maintenance costs were down significantly. The most decrease there is due to savings in fuel, both in the number of liters that we used in 2024, as well as the price of fuel based on what we budgeted. Our baler costs are down from budget. Typically, we do a couple orders of wire, but because the baling facility was down for the majority of 2024, we only had to do one order. That's why you're seeing savings there. And then on the capital expenditures, our cell costs were much lower than what we had budgeted because we had stockpiled some of the materials that were needed at the end of 2023, so we didn't have to actually pay for them come 2024. Overages particularly relate to maintenance costs. That would be rock for the facility and landfill gas maintenance. And then we had some overages in administration as well, professional fees, insurance, and advertising. So with all that in mind, the bottom line, you can see transfers to reserves. So we had budgeted $50,000 to be transferred to the operating reserve. We are still recommending that take place. And then because we had higher revenues and lower expenses than what we had anticipated, that leaves about $850,000 that could be transferred to the capital reserve for the solid waste facility. So after a transfer of $50,000 to the operating reserve, that would leave a balance of $554,000 in operating reserves. And after $850,000 to the capital reserve, that would leave a balance of $3.6 million in the capital reserve. The next page you'll see is the recycle facility. So you'll remember that the landfill and recycle add together to make up solid waste as a whole. So revenues are significantly higher than what we had budgeted, mostly because of that contract with Circular Materials. So when the budget was prepared, we did not have a contract with Circular Materials. We estimated that we would get $150 per ton. We actually got over $300 per ton of material that we processed. So that's what's leading to that favorable variance in revenue. And on the expense side of things, we had some expense savings in salaries and benefits, as well as admin costs, because we are no longer responsible for advertising relating to recycling. We're not spending it there, but we are spending it relating to promoting activities at the landfill. So that's why you saw the overages on the previous page with regard to advertising and public relations. Our wire costs were down as well. And the overages that you're seeing is we did do some upgrades to the facility. So on the maintenance costs, we had some repairs to our wall and canopy. And then for capital expenditures, we had an overhead door installed, as well as work on our baler in the recycling facility. So all of that leads to a projected deficit in recycling of $557,000. But compare that to, we had budgeted a deficit of 1.1 million. So we're about 580,000 better off in recycling because of this change to the operations. Any questions on solid waste? Okay, the next one that we'll look at is power generation. And power generation, I think you're all aware, has had a record year for production. So that's great news. To the end of December, we're projecting revenue of 1.6 million, which is about 546,000 over what we had budgeted. Some of that has to do with a special payment that we are going to receive in December for the rate adjustment that NB Power received. About 80,000 is what we're going to receive because of that rate adjustment dated back to when it came into effect. On the expense side of things, expenses are under for the most part, with the exception of maintenance costs. And that has to do with just maintenance on the engine in general. Our debt servicing was under budget. The second debenture on the engines, we had budgeted to have that come in 2023. The debenture didn't actually get issued until 2024, which pushes back our first payment until 2025. So that's why you're seeing the variance there. So because of the record year we've had with production and revenue, it means we can put much more into our reserve funds than what we had originally budgeted. So originally we had budgeted to transfer just under 170,000 to the reserve funds. But because of this record year, we can transfer 730,000 to reserve funds. And that would leave a balance of 101,000 as a surplus for 2024. So the split that we're recommending, because some of it would go to operating reserve, some would go to capital reserve. So 50,000, it's recommended to go to the operating reserve. That currently has a balance of 0. So that would reestablish that, because we have had an operating reserve in the past. And then we're recommending 680,000 be transferred to a capital reserve, which would give an estimated balance of 797,000 in that capital reserve, which can then be used the next time that the engines have to be refitted. And we would hope that we'll have enough money in that reserve fund to not have to go for a significant debenture like we did last time. Community development is the next fund that we'll look at. So if you look, you can see that before we consider reserve fund transfers, we would have had a surplus of about 38,000. So you can see revenues are over budget, and that's to do with other funding. So we do receive money to issue grants, and that exactly matches what you see down below in grants. And we also got some funding with regard to an employee that we hired. So that's why the higher revenues. And then on the expense side, you'll see salaries and benefits. It was being funded by that government funding. So there is an overage there, but it's more than covered. And then that grants is 100% covered by the other funding that's up above. So because of the higher revenues that we received, we are projecting that we could transfer 25,000 to an operating reserve fund, and that would leave us with a surplus in 2024 of just over 13,000. So community development has not had reserve funds previously, so this would establish a reserve fund again that could be used at the board's discretion in the future. So the last fund that we'll look at is regional transportation services. So for regional transportation services, we are projecting, before considering a reserve fund transfer, a surplus of 41,000. So the regional transportation study has just gotten underway. So that's why we're seeing some savings with regard to expenses. We had budgeted 89,000 for administration expenses, which was actually to provide the services. We're only going to be in the range of about 4,500 come the end of the year. So because of those savings, we are projected to have a surplus. So as a result, we are recommending $20,000 be transferred to an operating reserve. You'll remember last year, because the work wasn't undertaken in 2023, we had transferred 120,000 to an operating reserve. So that's going to leave a balance of 144,000 in that operating reserve that can be used in the future as well. We want to go back to the summary of transfers. So to accomplish all of these transfers, staff is recommending that the committee forward the following resolutions to the board for its consideration. So I won't read all of them. They pretty much cover exactly what I said, but I will be happy to take any questions at this point.
Oh, and any questions from directors?
No, I have none. Director Corey.
I have nothing.
Right. So typically, and Don or John, you can correct me if I'm out of order here. I'm sure you will. We don't always require a motion at this level.
That's correct.
Yeah. So we're looking.
Chair, we would be looking for an indication that the committee is prepared to support these and make these motions at the board meeting on the 18th.
Are there any issues in any of these from committee members? Any reason that we shouldn't put these recommendations forward?
I see none, Richard, and I'm prepared to, support them at the board level.
Okay. Any others?
I don't see any issues myself with it. I would like us, obviously, when you're transferring this amount of money, it goes to speak for the great work done by the CRSC to keep us in line and get all that. But it might be something that last year when I brought up the rates, I was told be cautious. It's never always as good as it seems to be, and this year it seems to be better. So great work, Brett, and all the staff that go along with it. But I would ask that we maybe revisit that at some point. But I'm prepared to support the what was put forward today.
As am I.
No issues here.
So we will move forward then with the basically accepting the reserve transfer amounts and to receive the report. Thank you, Mary Kay, as usual. Very well done and very well explained so that we know what's going on. If I'm correct, we're moving on now to the And I guess we could do a motion on this one if we want, because it only affects us. That's our motion to accept the 2025 meeting schedule. That would have us having meetings on February 4th, March 4th, April 1st, May the 6th, June the 3rd, September 4th, October 7th, November 4th, and December 2nd.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I apologize. That was meant to be for the board to consider for the upcoming year. I apologize if it got mixed in with
So
the
it's the
other.
board, it's the board, that's the board schedule, not the,
Yes.
all I would have had to do was read it.
That's all right, sir.
So,
Those things happen.
okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may I speak to the members and to staff, please, if we could?
You may, yes.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to our directors and the members of our CRSC team here. I don't like the word staff. I just like to call them team. I just want to say a big thank you for the guidance, the direction, and really want to thank Mary Kay and her team. They do a great job at keeping us on track, on budget, and on board. They alert us whenever there's an issue. And while we may have had the benefit of some surpluses again this year, it didn't come out from without effort on your team, your professional team here at the CRSC, going out, beating the doors, knocking on doors, and trying to leverage every bit of funding that we could. And so we've been able to be in a very enviable position. And I suspect at some point we'll start to hear the word no. But until that day, we're going to keep asking and leveraging those funds to be able to deliver for you and for the region. So I just want to thank the entire team, everybody from the front door to right up to my office. And thank you on behalf of everyone for the leadership that you provide on this as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Well, I'm certain that the Finance Committee echoes your comments. It's we've been well supported through this year and appreciate that. Now we need a motion, though, to move to closed session.
If I might, Mr. Chair, I believe you're operating, excuse me, off the board agenda for the 18th.
Well, so why am I? Oh, I see why. I see why. I'm opening the wrong agenda. Sorry about that, folks. That's when you're trying to work with two separate screens. So we're good then.
Yes, sir.
Let me just get back to the agenda so that I can be sure. Here we go. Yeah. Are there any, I'm not back to my agenda yet, so are there any other issues left to deal with on the agenda, John?
No, I believe we've covered off the general discussion and direction to staff to bring forward the motions, and that the board would be, or that the committee would be supporting these motions to the board. So we've received general consensus on that. And then, Mr. Chair, unless there's anything else, we would move for adjournment.
So we need a motion to adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
Second,
Seconded.
we're out of business. Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great Christmas, everyone. We'll see you Thursday anyway, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, Merry Christmas.
Everybody.